Welcome to Hope at Night, featuring Jonathan and Amanda Walter, Mike Tucker, Q&A with our live audience, and host Anil Kanda. Today's episode, What Makes Love Last? And here's your host, Anil Kanda.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hope at Night. Someone once said, love is one long sweet dream and marriage is the alarm clock. I'm hoping that this isn't true for you. But in a time when more than half of marriages fail, the big question we want to answer tonight is, can love really last? Our first guests are a writer-teacher couple who have been together for 12 years and counting. Their relationship has spanned 2 continents, multiple cultures, and 2 kids. We asked, and they agreed to come in and share some of their journey with us and what they've learned. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Jonathan and Amanda Walter. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Now, how did you two meet?
Well, I had the bright idea to study abroad, and he showed me the cafeteria. So
That's the short version. Yes. So I'm originally from Austria, and Amanda's from Canada. And I went to school in Austria and to college, and we met essentially on the first day of both of our college experience. And yes, I met her on the way to the cafeteria, and I showed her around. We did not date until over a year later. Yeah.
Wonderful. And now, what attracted you to each other?
When we met and we started talking and just getting to know each other, I just appreciated her spiritual depth and just her faith was so important to her. That was very important to me. I was looking for someone who puts God first and who you know is deeply connected into the spiritual, you know, into knowing Christ and following God's will in the Bible. And so for me, that was something that really I was impressed with her depth, but also with, at the same time, she could be, you know, sometimes you have this idea if someone is really spiritual, they have to be like a monk and, you know, it's just serious. But she can also be really funny and just, you know, adventurous.
Funny? I'm hilarious.
Yeah, you are hilarious. You are hilarious. But, you know, just being able to go on adventure. I mean, we did all kinds of adventures and that, you know, that combination I found was great. And then also just, her unique background, her culture, it was interesting to just get to know somebody, you know, from a different place, and yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
Amanda, were you thinking about relationships when you went to study abroad?
No, I was trying to avoid them, actually, especially in the context of he was studying, you know, theology, and I was not sure about how I felt about that. But here we are, and yeah.
How long have you been married?
9 years this week.
This week, yeah.
This week, and you have 2 kids?
Mm-hmm.
2 little girls, yeah.
Now, what's your cultural background?
So I come from a mix. My mom is Chinese, and my dad is from the Caribbean. So growing up navigating that was very interesting, and then adding Austria to the mix, and his mom's Norwegian, so, we've just
quite international combination and different approaches to life. And so we kind of had to, I guess, create our own culture, a third culture or a sixth culture, whatever it is if you start counting. And then now we live abroad together.
Yes.
So we're both not in our home countries. And so it's been
and trying to raise kids.
Trying to raise kids and all that is a unique experience.
Yeah. The United States is a melting pot of cultures, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, could you share some of the challenges that you did encounter in your relationship with the cultures and other factors?
One of the biggest challenges we had in general, and we're still working on it, is communication.
For sure.
First of all, you have just, you know, different, you know, genders think differently, right? That's just the basic. But then you add that to the layer of I'm a European, you know, she's born and raised in North America, but has heavy Chinese influence and then the Caribbean influence. And those are very different cultures. And so trying to navigate that, how do you deal with problems? And also you have the culture of our families that, you know, as well. But just navigating that was challenging in the beginning, especially, you know, because I could tell she had more of an avoidance view, while I was like, let's just face this head on. And so trying to learn from each other, we both had to grow. Like,
For sure.
I for sure went into this whole thing with this idealism. I was a theology major, so like I want to do everything right, and then realizing the reality is like, hey, we both have to grow, we both have to learn, and submit to God, and that way we grow together. Like if He's at the center, it brings us together, and we can kind of deal with these challenges that we face, whether it's cultural or any other issues. Yeah.
Amanda, what was your perspective with these challenges?
We have to kind of peel back the layers sometimes, like, oh, okay, this is what you meant, or realizing, oh, where you come from, you would experience this in this way and the other way around. So
Yeah.
I think that was a big
It's fascinating,
thing.
we sometimes also assume ethnicity equates to culture, but those are even of themselves two different things.
Yeah.
You could have people of two different similar ethnicity, but have different cultures.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And so within that, I'm sure it's much more complex and,
Yes.
and complicated than we
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's definitely has been hard at times. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we've had rough moments, but through it all, I always knew, even if we were fighting or something, I always knew we both go to Jesus for help, and we're gonna figure this out together. So that's essentially what always brings us together. We don't run away from the problems. It may take a time to process it, but through Christ's help, And now we are at the point where we laugh about when we have a rubbing point. We almost laugh about the issue because we know we've been there so many times, and we know what the issue is. So it's like it has become what used to be like the end of the world is now just it's kind of funny.
We do approach it with humor.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I guess this thing again. All right, I guess we're kind of like, oh, but yeah, it's and that's for me, that's the work of God in our lives, honestly, because when you have that, when you don't hold on to like I have to be right, when you're able to let go because both of you need Christ's help in your life, it makes a huge difference.
It does.
Yeah.
What were some of the approaches you took to these new challenges in this phase of your life?
I think he was better at approaching things. As he mentioned, I'm like the avoider. So I guess just accepting, okay, we need to like talk about things instead of hiding in the bathroom or whatever. that did
never
happen.
happened. But essentially being willing to
Yes.
talk and to pray, and then also to listen. I think that's where I struggle a lot, just listening and not giving advice. I mean, that's often a man-woman thing. Like you're like, okay, you want to fix, right? I want to fix the problem. And she doesn't want fixing. She just wants me to hear her and know her.
Yeah.
And that was something where I had to, learn to shut up. She has a lot of grace with me because I may hear her, but it takes time to change. It takes time to accept, okay, this is how she wants this to be communicated or this and that done. And so it's a process. And that's I think one of the key things for marriage is to understand it's all a process. We're growing together.
Brain muscle memory.
Yes, it takes a while. The older you get, it takes longer to really get into your brain that, okay, this is the way we do this together.
For sure.
But yeah.
How has God been part of your marriage relationship?
How has he not? I don't think we'd be sitting here if he wasn't part of our relationship.
Yeah, he was always at the center from the beginning on. Now, I gotta say, there have been ups and downs in terms of how often we do devotions together or things like that.
Seasons.
And especially now that we have children, it's tough. It's tough to have that quiet time, let alone
Alone
time or quiet time together.
Yes.
It's very difficult now. We have 2 tornadoes in our house. We love them, but they're tornadoes.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's you meet God and you have that in
Or he meets you where you are.
where you are in the moment because
Yeah.
you're learning about his character as you take care of children
Yes.
together. For sure.
That's exactly right. His grace doesn't meet us where we should be. It meets us where we're
Yes.
at, and it lifts us up.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Beautiful.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Does the Bible talk about marriage?
The Bible describes, this
The
fantastic,
Proverbs 31.
entrepreneurial, amazing woman, right? In Proverbs 31, and often that is lifted up as like, okay, every woman should be like this, But then what about the men? Shouldn't they, step up as well? And I think it's Job 29. It talks about,
he's at the gate.
Yeah, like a man who is
gate,
a godly man because like it's not just a woman, it's the guy too. There's beautiful stories in the Bible. There's love stories. A Song of Solomon is a beautiful piece a beautiful book in the Bible. It's very poetic.
The flame of Yahweh.
The flame of Yahweh, right? There's the flame of the Lord. It talks about the effect that when a man and a woman come together in marriage, it is a glimpse of the character of God that you experience. Of course, if the focus is on God. So that's something an ideal that for me has always been something I wanted before we got married. I was like, I want that experience of knowing God through marriage. And I can say that, it's possible. And it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing experience as you submit to Jesus in your marriage. You learn to submit to each other, but in a very hopeful and joyful way that teaches you about Christ's character. Yeah.
Sure.
Jonathan, Amanda, you are a young couple. But I'm
Thank
sure
you.
But I'm sure you meet many young couples as well who are thinking about marriage. They're thinking maybe even about just getting into a relationship. What advice do you give to them?
Don't go crazy in terms of thinking, okay, it has to be this person. This may sound crazy, but I think it's important that you don't make this decision lightly, that you don't rush, that you think it through. But then also trust that God is at work. As you said, you're marrying a sinner, that God is at work in your partner's life, and that you also let God work in your life. Really, that's the key. Having a living relationship with Christ will help you in your relationship with each other.
Yeah, marriage isn't about two perfect people getting together.
No.
It's about two broken, imperfect people who are getting together and allowing God to be part of that relationship.
Sure.
Jonathan, Amanda, fantastic discussion. I know we're just getting started. We've been fortunate to get a little insight into the marriage journey of the Walters. When we come back, we'll be talking with the marriage counselor, author, and television personality. We'll see what he has to say about the secrets to lasting love. Don't go away. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've chatted with Jonathan and Amanda Walter about their marriage journey. Up next, we have Mike Tucker, a counselor who has written marriage books, conducted marriage seminars, and has been the expert behind the Mad About Marriage television series. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Mike Tucker. Mike, I love the title of your series, Mad About Marriage. Now, how in the world did you come up with a title like that?
We brainstormed about it, and finally someone's asked, well, are you madly in love or just plain mad? And so we said, yes, both answers are correct. We're madly in love. Some people are madly in love in the morning, but by the afternoon they want to strangle each other. That's just life in the world when it comes to marriage. Marriages are marriages, and they're all messed up, and yet they all have beautiful potential. So Mad About Marriage, we want to flip the switch from just plain mad to madly in love.
Love it. What do you think are some of the dangers to a healthy relationship?
Everything from infidelity to financial issues to health issues. But one of the biggest is just the way we communicate. You mentioned that before with the different styles of communication, the cultural issues involved with it. The strongest predictor of divorce is the existence or persistence of one or more of 4 negative patterns of communication. This has been documented by 2 different researchers, different areas, and they came up with pretty much the same solution, the same idea. The way we talk to each other changes the fabric of the relationship. When you speak in a harsh manner, in an unloving, uncaring manner, it changes the relationship. You can say even tough things to each other when you say it in love and in a kind and respectful way, and the marriage actually survives and can grow through it. So changing the way we talk has a big influence on our marriages.
What do you notice are the same issues that keep coming up to the surface?
Well, again, communication is the issue, the primary issue that I see, but it can be finances. Sex is another issue. Different values, different goals, lack of commitment to the relationship, all of those are things that will happen and will put a marriage at risk. We just bring our own brokenness into a relationship. Everyone's broken. There's not a person in here that doesn't have baggage. Some of us are checking our baggage and others are carrying it on, but it's still baggage, it doesn't matter. The size is not the issue, it's there. And so when we bring that baggage into this relationship and our dysfunction spills over, then sparks are bound to fly, and they do. But those are the things. I see brokenness from the past, I see addiction still, I see money issues, I see communication issues, and spirituality issues. Again, a negative picture of God can change your spirituality to the point where it makes you critical, condemning, fault-finding, and unforgiving. And that's with a spiritual person. That means the picture of God is skewed. And when you change the picture of God, you change the relationship.
Let's say somebody comes from just a very troubled background, broken background. Is there hope for people like that?
Of course. There's hope for anyone. The truth is, though, that some people are broken enough that they really shouldn't be married, or they shouldn't be married now. Some people are too broken for relationships, for a committed relationship, because the level of toxicity that they carry is such that it's not possible to enter into a loving, caring relationship where both parties are safe.
Let's talk about sex. You ready for this?
You bet. Hey, I'm old enough. I've talked about this in front of big audiences. I'm good with this.
The walk in the park.
There you go.
You know, when it comes to a lot of issues that people are facing in regards to relationships, pornography, infidelity, is that the end of the relationship, or is there hope for situations like that?
There's hope. There's hope. There are three types of affairs. There's an emotional affair, purely emotional, no physical. There's a physical affair, not emotional. Then there's those that are both emotional and physical. The hardest to recover from is the one that's both emotional and physical. The easiest is actually just the physical affair. The emotional affair is more difficult to recover from. However, I've seen couples recover from all three types of affairs and still have a happy, productive relationship. And I will warn them coming into this. This is hard. There's not going to be anything easy about this, but if you will do the work, I guarantee you that not only can you survive, but you'll be stronger than you ever were before. And I've had people look at me like I was from Mars, like I'd lost my ever-loving mind that I would say something like that. And then yet, a couple years later, I'll get a note from them. I thought you were crazy, but you're absolutely right. We did the work. We're happy we did the work. We're closer than we've ever been.
That's incredible. From that brokenness, there's a bond that's even stronger that can take place.
Yeah. Now, that's not a good reason to have an affair. You can have that bond without that kind of brokenness in your relationship. But I do believe that healing is available, and I know that when God heals, He heals completely. And so I believe that there can be restoration of those marriages.
What about a couple that's been together for a very, very long time and has lost that spark? Any way to reignite it?
Of course there is. What's the old song? You've lost that love and feeling. Well, you can gain the love and feeling back. Don't worry, I won't sing for you.
But we can have a special music.
Yeah, but you can gain that love and feeling back. You remember the things that attracted you to each other in the first place, and you celebrate those. There may be a work of forgiveness you have to do for each other, where you actually say the words and you lay the bitterness aside. You receive the forgiveness that is offered to you. Then you remember, what is it that I must do for my spouse in order for them to feel loved? What are those things? And if you don't know, ask. Ask, what are the things that you want me to do to communicate my love for you? When you behave in loving ways toward an individual and you persist in that and you constantly examine the positive attributes that they possess, it begins to eventually change the emotions. Behavior results in emotional change. Now, the opposite is true as well. Emotional change results in behavioral change. But we can determine what the emotion will be by changing the behavior with intention.
Mike, what advice do you give to husbands that can't remember what took place last week, but wives that remembered what happened 3 or 4 years ago on August 14th?
Remember this, I am so sorry. to acknowledge that, yeah, sometimes we're clueless. We are clueless as a product of testosterone. We're not going to remember, and for the most part, most of us will not remember the details like she will. We will not notice the details of the relationship like she does. Men don't typically even understand what a relationship is unless they marry well. Men don't do intimacy. We have friends, we have colleagues, we have buddies. We do things together, we make fun of each other. That's kind of the male bonding experience. There's no genuine closeness or intimacy for most of us. The Jonathan-David relationship is a rarity. If a man has an intimate relationship in his life, he's lucky if he's got one, and that's usually his spouse. Women may have numerous intimate relationships. So we learn intimacy from our wives. And then when we learn that, we also find that that's what brings value and vigor and joy to our lives, is that intimate relationship. It made everything better. You figure that out, by the way, for sure, when you lose that partner. When my wife died, I realized I'd only had one intimate relationship in my life, and that was her. I'd had friends, I'd had colleagues, I'd had all sorts of buddies, but nothing that brought me the joy that she did. So, yeah, she may remember those things because she understands relationships better than you do. So be humble, be broken. Say, I've messed up, and I've messed up more times than what I can count. I want to be a better man. Forgive me for what I've done. How can I do better? I really want to make a change.
I'm sure as you're saying this, there's some husbands that are taking notes right now.
Yeah. The research actually, John Gottman and Julia Gottman say that about 80% of marriages can be made better if the man will change his attitude. That's the one ingredient. About 80% of the time, if the man changes his attitude and therefore his behavior congruent with that attitude, it will improve the marriage and save it.
But Mike, what do you say to wives who feel like their husbands don't love them anymore?
Yeah. Well, understand that love is a decision. The feelings may be gone, but if the commitment and the decision are there, then you've got something to build on. Mm-hmm. And again, to you, I say, treat him with the love that in a way that will communicate to him your love for him. And when you do that, when you're demonstrating that by doing the things that he wants you to do in order to demonstrate that love, you treat him with kindness and with respect, and you communicate your need for something that is reciprocal, that's the place to start. And maybe you go to a counselor, maybe you pay someone to sit and listen to you and give you good advice, but you get the help that you need, but behave in a loving fashion, and enhance your commitment to the individual, and change the behavior to the point where he hears the message you're sending. Yes, I love you, and I want to be loved back.
Mike, I got to ask you this. In your current relationship with your wife, how do you keep the fire alive?
I think that the things that you must do is you realize that romance is not just what happens in the bedroom. Romance starts in the kitchen. It starts in the living room. It starts when you wake up in the morning. You learn to talk to each other in a way that is loving and respectful and kind. Mm-hmm. You treat each other with gentleness, with respect. You applaud each other's successes. You weep at each other's failures and each other's pain. You live together, and then you take time together. You serve others together, you worship together, and you treat each other with gentleness and respect.
Wonderful. Jonathan, Amanda, what do you do to keep the fire going?
A lot of what Mike said is true. It's the little things, showing that you care, outside of the bedroom, that you care, by doing the dishes, or by just being willing to serve. For me, I remember early on in a marriage, it's, we got married, and then, you have all the chores in the house. And I start to think of well, who's doing more? I'm doing all this extra stuff, and she's not doing.
Wait, you thought that?
Yeah. For a very short time.
Don't worry, we have a counselor here.
We may have to talk. But soon enough, I realized, no, it's a privilege to serve, and stop the counting. It doesn't matter. No. You're here for each other, but in the service of each other, in the selflessness that we give each other. We see how much we care for each other, even in the mundane things of life. There's beauty in it, and that for me, seeing how she, now that we have children, how she deals with our children, because she's home more than I am, that is very attractive, if that makes sense. And then, of course, the things that, date night and so on, we try to squeeze it in when we can. Now that our children are slightly older and we're okay with a babysitter at home, we're going to do more of that again. But our situation was we were dating long distance before we got married. So the first 3 to 6 years of our marriage was essentially like what other people do when they're dating. And so we just had a lot of fun, like, oh, let's do this, and we can just go out and do that. And now that we have kids, that's a little harder to do. But just having fun together, but also serving each other. I think that's what really, that's quality fire for the marriage.
You didn't get married to solve problems. You got married because you enjoyed each other's, you enjoyed the same things, you enjoyed being with each other, you had fun together. So it's important you continued to do that.
Absolutely.
Yes. And finding those things that we both are passionate about, like being creative together or doing music together. That's a lot of fun in that.
Amanda, what do you do when it comes to keeping the fire alive in the relationship? What's something you just go to, you're like, hey, I know this works on Jonathan.
I don't have to do much.
I'm a simple man.
Make a good meal, you know, it's
That's
A+.
it.
I don't know if you have this saying in English, but in German there's a saying that says, Liebe geht durch den Magen. It means love goes through the stomach.
Yeah.
And I can attest there's truth to that. Like the meals she makes, I'm always like, come on, girl, it's amazing. It's so good.
It's your soulmate every time you're right.
Men are simple creatures.
Yeah. And I can tell she puts love into it. You know, it's just not just like, here, I whip something up. She's like,
I mean, there are those days too.
there are those days,
But
when it's simple, but when you can see she puts the effort in, it's something very beautiful. Yeah, I find it very attractive.
Thank you.
Mike, when it comes to a healthy, happy marriage, what's the core of that? What are the core essentials to happy, healthy, long-lasting marriage?
I think the research shows us that spirituality is an important component of this, that there's a shared vision of God, which is positive. You cannot have a shared vision of an angry, harsh God and have a happy marriage. You just can't. But when you see God as loving, who is gracious, who is compassionate, engaged in your everyday life, and having a commitment to that God and sharing that together, that's core. And then just learning how to talk to each other. Men and women think differently, they communicate differently, and so we have to become bilingual, so to speak, and communicate in that language. For most women, when they tell a story, they can take 6 pages to tell a story that I can tell in 2 sentences. You know, but they've got all this detail, and you wonder, why is it really necessary that I know what she was wearing, what you were wearing, what you ordered for dinner? And the answer is yes. Women bond through shared emotions. And when they tell the story, if they can paint enough pictures, enough of the details, they think maybe you can feel that emotion. And if you feel the emotion, then you bond with her because you know what she went through, and you've shared her day that way. Men bond through shared activity. And so it's not usually that we're as enthralled by all the details or the emotions. And again, there are variations on that theme. Some men do the details as well. But when we can learn to listen that way and even ask questions for more information, which seems impossible at times, but yes, there's more information to be given. And then share details with our stories. Again, that brings us back together. So we learn to communicate in a way of kindness, respect, gentleness, authenticity, and shared values and goals and dreams.
You know, when you look at the Bible tells the truth about humanity. It doesn't lie.
No.
It's not like any other holy book that just avoids all the embarrassing thing. What's really great about the Bible is it tells the truth about human brokenness. When you look in the scriptures and you see a sort of gamut of human relationships that exist, what are some relationship characteristics that we can pull from and draw from and say, this is worth emulating, this is worth inculcating into our experience, versus some that you say, all right, the lesson here is we need to avoid that. What would you say some of those are?
The Bible is an interesting book because although it does give us some positive illustrations, it also gives us more negative illustrations than positive. I did an interview years ago with the Nelson twins. These are Ricky Nelson, who was a 50s and 60s rock star, you know. His twins had a band together, the Nelsons. And I asked them what they learned from their father. They said sometimes what is better than a good example is a good bad example. And so they learned from the bad example of their father what not to do. I think that we had that throughout Scripture. When you look at the stories of the families in Genesis, there's huge dysfunction here. preferring one child over another and lying, she's my sister, when she's really, it goes over and over again. The dysfunction is incredible. And so the Bible's saying that's what brokenness looks like. And yet these are the patriarchs. These are my children. And these are the ones that I built the faith on. These broken, crazy people. So I think as we look at that, there's hope. But also there's an example of what not to do. And then we have the wisdom literature. It says a kind word turns away wrath. It talks about preferring one versus the other. The passage where Paul says that we are to submit to one another. He talks about mutual submission, not just women to men. Mutual submission. That means I'm going to do or say what's in my spouse's best interest, even if it costs me something. I'm going to make her the priority rather than myself. Selfishness is always destructive of love. Unselfishness, kindness, always engenders love.
Honestly, the way God deals with humanity, it's often portrayed as, Jesus is the husband and the church is the bride. And so the way Jesus treats us is, I think, a great example for how we should treat each other. Learning from how God treats me is how I can treat my spouse. Yeah.
Wonderful. When it comes to relationships, obviously there are lots of people from across the spectrum that are watching this show. What practical steps can one take to have a healthy, happy relationship again?
Starts with you. You can't depend on your relationship to make you happy. You have to be a happy person beforehand.
Yeah.
And if you're unhappy in your relationship now, take a deep look inside, because there's something going on inside of you that needs to be fixed. You're as broken as your spouse is. And so when you fix that first, now you've got a basis to work with. And you may need outside help to do that. And part of it's going to be a spiritual healing as well as the emotional healing. But when you've done that, then you look at your partner and you begin to look at them through the eyes of God. How does God see this individual? And is that how I should see them? What can I do to minister to this individual? Whether or not I get from this person what I want, how would God have me treat them? And when you begin with that in mind, God takes care of the rest. There are times when even that, a marriage should end. There are times when marriages should end. But other than that, if this is a person who's not tied down with numerous addictions or with an emotional disorder, then God can take that best effort. You're trying to see them as God sees them and treat them as God would have you treat them, and they will respond.
What would you say to someone who doesn't have the spiritual influencers in their life or mentors? Where do they start?
You understand that church and sermons and that sort of thing are tools. That's not genuine spirituality. Spirituality begins with you understanding that there is a God who wants a relationship with you, and it's longing to see His face, to know Him, to be known by Him, to surrender to Him and allow Him to infill your life. That's where we start, with that desire, a desire for something better, something eternal. When we see that in our God, and we find the healing that He loves and accepts us and forgives us as we are, then we can use the tools. The tools are just tools, that's all they are. But it begins with this inward journey to see the living God, to experience His love and His joy in your life, to see Him as someone who sees you as better than you ever dare dream see yourself, who loves you with an eternal love, who is compassionate for you, and wants you to be a healthy, happy individual. When you see that, then that begins to change you.
What if someone doesn't even know how to pray?
You can look at examples of prayer in the Bible if you wanted to. But the other thing is, remember that there's no magic formula to prayer. Just talk to Him like a friend. I had a visit with an individual. I explained the Bible explained the salvation to them. He showed up at a prayer meeting, and it was time to pray, and he'd never prayed. And his prayer was something like, "Hey God, this is Tim. I met you today. Mike introduced me to you. Hey, thanks. I appreciate you, and thanks for loving me." He said, "You do. Amen." That was his prayer. That's a beautiful prayer. I don't know of anything more beautiful than that. Start there. Just talk to Him like you would any friend. Talk to Him.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Mike. Mike has raised some fantastic principles on building a marriage that lasts. But I'm sure you've got questions. After the break, we'll see what questions our live audience has for Mike. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been talking with Mike Tucker on helping love last. But now I want to know what questions our live audience has for Mike and the Walters today. Who has our first question? Right over there.
If someone's been married multiple times, is that a bad sign?
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. There are a variety of reasons why marriages can end. I have a friend who's been widowed 3 times. So that does not necessarily mean that this is a bad thing. There are other times when a divorce occurs and it was not your fault at all. And again, to say not your fault, we may say 90-10. Most are closer to 50-50, but there are times when it's not your fault. Times when a marriage should end with untreated addiction and abuse, things of that nature, and of course serial adultery. So it doesn't have to be a bad sign, but it is something that you ought to look at. So if you're wanting to date someone, you're engaged in a relationship, and they've been married multiple times, it's time to ask questions to figure out why this occurred, what part they played in it, and what it tells you about this individual. Has there been healing? Has there been growth? What's going on with this individual?
Anyone else? Right over there.
Right here.
Yes, how can a relationship be repaired after a lot of hurt and mistrust?
The first and easiest thing is forgiveness. Now, I say easiest, it's the easiest answer, it's not the easiest thing to do. Forgiveness is hard. And usually it requires a great deal of divine intervention to do this and do it right. And a lot of people tell you to forgive, but they don't tell you how. In my seminar, I outline a 4-step process for forgiveness. And I think it's more important to engage in the process than it is to actually the forgiveness itself. So that's where it starts. But there also must be changes. If indeed we're hurting each other, we have to figure out why we're hurting each other, how we hurt each other. And there have to be behavioral changes, attitudinal changes. We may even want to ask the question, why did I behave in this fashion? Is this something I learned from my family of origin? Or is there something systemically wrong within me? Is there something going on psychologically? Something that I have not dealt with? So a lot of questions to ask. And all those things have to be dealt with in order to undo the ugliness of the past. But as we make those changes, as we address ourselves, we figure out who we are and why we behave as we behave, and change that, we heal, we change, and we employ the grace of God to give and receive forgiveness, then those marriages can be restored. Relationships can be saved. It's hard work. I don't want to lie to you and say, oh, just forgive and you're good. No, this is hard work. And it takes time for the heart and the emotions to heal. It takes time to make those changes inside of us that result in new behavior. It takes time. But when you do the work, it is worth the effort. Even if the marriage isn't saved, doing the work makes you a better person. It makes you a person who is healthier and got more to give and to receive out of life. So the work is necessary.
Jonathan or Amanda, would you guys add to that?
Relationship is process. You're going through time together, and when you have a lot of damage has been done, a lot of brokenness, it also requires both parties to be willing. It may start with one party showing grace, and that may over time invite the other party, the other person to see there is hope, there is healing, there is an openness to maybe restore and to forgive. And so in that process, I think to commit to that process, at least for a little while, to see what will happen as grace is extended and as we trust, if you're coming from a spiritual context, as we trust that God through the Holy Spirit is working on that, on your partner who may have hurt you, I believe that healing, as he mentioned, can take place. Yeah. But knowing that it takes time, it is hard, and but I would always say give it a chance. Always give it a chance, because God is in the business of healing and restoring. But there are times when things have to end, as he mentioned. There's times where you have to draw a line.
To piggyback on what you just said about giving it the chance, the most painful words I've heard people say is, I wonder if I had done this, if it would have worked. And to leave something undone, untried, can result in regrets. The research shows that couples who get divorced, 18 months after the divorce, are no happier than they were before the divorce. So it may be that that wasn't always the thing that was causing the unhappiness. That make sense? But couples who stick it out, who do the hard work, 5 years later will usually report, most of them report being happy and fulfilled in the marriage. Yeah. So again, there are exceptions to this, and I don't want to paint this broad stroke that, you know, this is true for everyone. But I think that most of our marriages are good enough to save. It takes the work, as you mentioned, and you have to give it a chance. You give it a try. And sometimes you have to persist in that. But if you can do the work, both of you especially doing that work, you can come out not just better people, but with a better marriage.
Mm. Fantastic. Any other questions?
When I got married, the minister that performed the ceremony required that we go through premarital counseling. It's something she required of all couples that she performed the ceremony for. What are your views on premarital counseling?
So I'm a big fan of premarital counseling. I have served as a pastor, and I've done this for couples. We did it together as well. And I believe it is super helpful. If it's done right, it will address major questions, the major things that can cause issues later on. Now, it's not a guarantee, okay? But there are wonderful tools out there. I remember when I was, training to be a pastor, we did this certification in a program called Prepare and Enrich, which helps you assess a relationship and to see, okay, where's some growth potential, where are some strengths. And it's so helpful to help the couple reflect, because usually couples that are about to get married, they are deeply in love and they have the rose-colored glasses, and they may not see clearly some of the issues that they should at least be aware of. Now, it's not going to fix all the issues, but I think it's a great way to kind of step into the direction of having a very intentional relationship that's not just built on infatuation, but on a solid understanding of who the other person is, and what their values are, and if they're good to grow together in that way. As I said, it's not a guarantee, but it's a great start, and it may even bring to light things that make you reconsider the marriage.
Jonathan, let me ask you a question. Yeah. When should they start premarital counseling? Day after the proposal, when they're discussing the idea of marriage, a month before marriage? When should they start something like that?
I don't know if there's a perfect answer for this, because people live lives all kinds of ways. I would say probably the earlier the better, and you don't even have to be engaged for it. You can there's counseling available even for dating. In that same realm, this counseling is like a tool. It helps you get to know your partner better, and then you the closer you come to your wedding day, obviously, the more intentional you want to be about it. But I would say the earlier the better.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And premarital counseling is like counseling, and it's like doctors. They're good and they're bad, and so. If you get bad information during the premarital counseling, then it's not going to be helpful for you.
True.
But the tool that you mentioned is a quality tool. It is time-tested and it is empirically researched, and it's a good tool. There are good tools out there that can be used for this. And if a practitioner has those tools and will use them, or has other skills that they can bring to the table to provide quality information with an honest examination of the couple and of your own strengths and weaknesses, this can be a very good tool. I did premarital. I do my own kind of stuff when premarital counseling. I haven't used the Prepare and Enrich, although it's a wonderful tool and I highly endorse it. But I shared with this couple the 4 negative communication patterns that exist that are threatening marriages. And as we talked, I saw all 4 of them. And so I brought that out. I mentioned that. And they admitted that, yes, they had all 4. I said, I beg you, don't get married until this is fixed. Mm-hmm. They went out to eat later that night, and they broke up. And the young lady who I had known for years called me up. She said, we broke up. And she's crying. She said, but it was the right thing to do. I tell you what, though, if I ever find another one, I'm bringing him to you. I said, okay, we'll do that. I'll try not to break this one up, but it's better to do that before the wedding than it is to have the divorce. And so sometimes it will result in that, and other times it will result in growth so that the problems can be fixed and you can live happily ever after.
What about a couple that comes to you that is sleeping together already?
Yeah.
Try before you buy.
Yeah.
What would you say to a couple? How would you minister? How would you counsel a couple that's already sleeping together? Maybe they're even living together.
Yeah.
before marriage?
There are two issues that are at stake here. One would be more of a secular research-based issue, and the other is a spiritual issue for people who are believers. As a believer, you're doing something that is forbidden by Scripture. And as such, I need to find a way to lovingly, gently let you come to that discovery on your own, and then to listen to the voice of God and what He's asking you to do in this area. When it just comes to simply a research basis, there's a lot of research that tends to indicate that try before you buy is a bad idea, just as living together is. Women usually take those commitments more seriously than men do. Men they live together usually because they know there's an out. It's an easier out than divorce. Women will usually view that as the same thing as marriage. And so if indeed he finds an easy way out, she is hurt just as severely as she would be if indeed this was marriage. There's also research showing that kind of intimacy, kind of the cart before the horse, as we would put it, so to speak, can actually have long-term detrimental effects to the relationship. There are risks at entering into too deep a level of intimacy too early in the relationship. And so sleeping together can be one of those. And so I've actually encouraged couples to move out, to practice abstinence between now and the wedding date. Let's see how this affects your relationship. There are other parties at play. Sometimes parents are aware of this, they're hurt by it. This is a good olive branch to them to say, we're going to change what we've been doing. We're going to find repentance and move forward, and then give this a try without the sex. And then see if we can still move toward a union together. So there are a lot of options, I think, and it just needs to be approached gently. If I approach this with condemnation, with judgment, then not only do I produce a load of guilt that God has not ordered me to bring to the table, but I may also rupture the relationship with them and not have any further help with them. I want them to be led by the Spirit, not by Mike. I want them to discover what's right and wrong by the Spirit, not by me.
Mike, what would you say to a couple or maybe an individual within the relationship that says, how do I know if they're good in bed?
I think that what I would tell them is what the research says is that's overrated. The skills of making love are easily learned. It does not take a genius to do this. And actually, it has more to do with you and your attitude when you're making love than it does with your partner. If your attitude is right and if you're filled with love for your partner, this is going to be an enjoyable experience for you. It's not just technique. There are techniques that can be learned, and you can go to a therapist to learn some of those to get that information. But I think more valuable than that is just simply the spirit of a spirit of service, even in the bedroom, says, I put your pleasure above mine. That's a healthy marriage. And when you study how I can bring pleasure to my mate, I hope that children are in bed by now when we're airing this. But when that is your goal, and you've made it a quality experience for your mate, and your mate is doing the same thing for you, how can this go wrong? You need to examine attitudes about sexuality before you get married. Is there a congruence here? Is there a place where we meet? Or are attitudes about sexuality in marriage so oppositional that this is not going to work? If one says it's only for making babies and the other says it's for emotional bonding as well, either we come to a meeting of the minds or this is going to be a huge issue in marriage.
Jonathan, Amanda?
And the quality of your lovemaking is so much more beautiful and meaningful if you've done the work, if you know each other, if you have a deep intimacy that's not just on the physical, but the physical is really just a celebration of the emotional, of the relationship that you already have. It's kind of like the dessert. But before you get to the dessert, you go through the different courses of the meal, which is, doing the dishes, helping each other, being there for each other, knowing each other. And then the sexual coming together is a celebration of that. Put in the work and your sex life will be better. Sex in a married relationship is 100 times better than just casual coming together with a random person or even living together before.
Mike,
let's add to that a piece of research.
Sure.
Research has been done in the United States because we research everything.
Yes.
Because apparently there's grant money for everything. We research who's having the most frequent and the best quality sex in the United States, and every year the research comes back to the same answer.
Yeah.
The most frequent and most satisfying sex occurs in long-term marriage between Christians.
Yes.
Wow.
And so I love telling that to young, to teenagers. The people having the best sex in America are your parents.
Here's a follow-up question. What do you tell a couple before their first night?
What I tell them before their first night is to just be gentle and to have fun, to relax and enjoy this experience and laugh, because it may be laughable for. That's okay. This is not a performance. This is the two of you finding a way to give expression to your love in a physical fashion that is reserved for marriage. So, you know, educate yourself. Yes, you need to know something about human sexuality, about how this is for a man and for a woman, and then experiment. Enjoy the process. Talk about it beforehand together. Talk about it afterwards. Talk about what's fun, what's not fun, what's enjoyable, what's not, and enjoy the experience.
Beautiful. Any other questions?
So is it true that you should not go to bed angry with your spouse?
I think that is the better plan. If you can find a resolution, it may mean some sleepless nights. It may mean that you're up late at night. But I think that for the most part that is a good plan, that we're not going to allow this to be a poison that inhabits our relationship. If it is so toxic that we spend 2 weeks without talking to each other, that's a failure. Yeah. We need to find a better way to deal with it. And the better way is to process it now and to find a level of accommodation and forgiveness now. The sooner the better, otherwise it begins to fester.
But I think the principle is deal with it. Don't ignore the problem.
That's the principle.
Deal with it. And sometimes, ideally, as you said, is deal with it before you go, before the day is over. But sometimes it takes time.
It does. In fact, one of the problem-solving methods that we use, that I teach, we make an appointment for our discussion of issues. If we discuss it right now in the heat of the moment, then we're likely to fall into some negative communication patterns. And so we say, I need to talk to you about X. When's a good time? And we set an appointment usually within the next 24 to 48 hours, which is still close enough to the event that it's fresh in our minds, and yet long enough that maybe we've had the opportunity to pray about it and to process some emotions, so we're not quite as emotional during the discussion. And then you go through the process of accommodation. You understand each other, you forgive each other, and you find a path forward. And so the next 24 to 48 hours is usually the window we try to get people to do that in. So that would not work with the don't let the sun go down. I can decide I'm not going to be bitter and angry tonight when I go to sleep, but this is not resolved yet. And we can resolve it in the next day or two, but I've made the decision, the conscious decision, I'm not going to be resentful against my wife. And I can't tell her what to have toward me, but if she'll take that same attitude toward me, when it's time for us to find resolution, we realize we're a team. This is not my opposition. She's not the loyal opposition that I'm fighting. I'm not trying to win. This is only a win if both of us win. And so this is my teammate, and as a team, we have to work together to find the best version of Team Tucker.
Beautiful. Any other questions?
Amanda and Jonathan, do you find it difficult raising your kids with so many different cultural influences? And how do you decide which values and traditions to carry out in your homes and lives?
I think growing up in a multicultural home myself, the way I have approached this so far is kind of filling those deficits where I felt I could have had it a little better. So for example, one thing I'm very insistent on is that my kids are bilingual. So that's really emphasized in our house, bilingual home, doing things in both languages. And then I think, we were married for so long before we had kids that we kind of picked and chose what traditions we wanted before we even had kids. So it's just carrying it out now.
And then also we added new traditions.
Yes.
We made our own traditions, or even took traditions from other cultures that we liked. So we're very, I guess, globalized in our thinking, in our way.
International.
Yeah. We're not too patriotic about any place except heaven. But we are, you kind of create your own. I think this is the world we live in. You create your own world, and you try to take the best from everywhere.
Yeah. Good on you.
One more question.
How do you make God the center of your marriage, and what techniques do you use to do so?
The first thing is to make him the center of your life. And that means me. I need to make sure that God is at the center, that my life is hidden in His. I've accepted Him as my Savior. And I'm no longer Mike Tucker pastor, Mike Tucker counselor, Mike Tucker. I'm Mike Tucker, fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ, cleverly disguised as a pastor, a counselor, TV personality, whatever it may happen to be. I'm first and foremost, that's my citizenship, and that should change the way I view others and the way I behave. When my wife has done the same thing, and we want this to be together, then we engage in those activities together. There are activities that you can engage in which will produce spiritual growth and spiritual unity. That means prayer, Bible study, meditation upon Scripture, and the sharing of that experience together, what we've learned. It means corporate worship, but it also means outreach, doing something to bless someone else. That's why when I remarried after the death of my wife of 40 years, I wanted someone who would engage in ministry with me. And she was already engaged in music ministry and learning to preach. And do the other things. Right now she's doing hospital chaplaincy. And so we have combined forces, and we found some things that she can support me in while I do some things I support her in, and then we created stuff we could do simultaneously, do together. So finding a ministry to bless others is another key for this. But it starts with me, with my own expression of spirituality. It starts with combining that with my wife, being intentional about it, finding ways to grow spiritually, and then reaching out, sharing that gift with others, and doing something to benefit the world around us.
Wonderful. The Bible tells us God is love.
Amen.
And we want that love to be at the center of our relationships.
You got it.
Thank you so much. Tonight, we've taken a practical look at the pillars of a strong marriage and how we can build a marriage that not only survives, but thrives. Whether you're newlyweds or have been married for decades, I hope these principles can help you strengthen your relationship and deepen the bond you share with your spouse. If you're facing challenges, remember you don't have to face them alone. God is with you, ready to guide you, heal your heart, and restore your relationship if you will both let Him. Don't be afraid to ask Him for the strength, wisdom, and love that only He can provide. Together with your spouse and with God, you can build a marriage that reflects His love. No matter what you're facing in your marriage, where there is God, there is always hope. Take care, and we'll see you next time on Hope at Night.